of opening government. Yeah, Prime Minister, the floor is yours.
Am I clear?
Yep, you're audible, loud and clear.
Record. Wait a minute. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, it has been decades since a presidential debate involved in any actual quote-unquote debate under the status quo right now. The candidate don't seek to persuade voters, for example, to vote them with argumentation and evidence anymore. The moderators under the status quo aren't even interested in facilitating a real discourse, a real argumentation about debating towards this presidential candidates debate, right? But under the status quo, and the vast majority of viewers who tune in do so not to learn more about each candidate's policies, but to root for one and sneer at others under the status quo right now. That's why we believe that presidential debate in US bring more harm than good under the status quo. But I'm going to bring you two things under my speech. First, how it is how under the status quo presidential debating are so harmful, and second of all, how it also creates a toxic discourse. But first argument, right? Why under the status quo presidential debates is so harmful in USA? Look, we understand that the presidential debates was created in the past for gain voters, like how it is in form of formal debates aired in television and shows how certain president candidates feel towards one particular issue, for example. But look, under the status quo right now, we believe that this is not significant anymore, and this is this is very toxic, right? Look, under the status quo, rather than every candidate telling their argumentation towards how they have a different view towards certain issue under the status quo, instead of showing the problem, for example, they shift this debate into personal boasting, ladies and gentlemen. What is resulted into? It is resulted into on how each president's candidates are, for example, attacking of others' candidates personally, like how, for example, Trump attacking Biden, for example, or how even Biden attacking another Democrat candidate, right? This is what we don't want under our side of the house, because we believe that under the status quo right now, rather than the argumentation are about practicality or the value that this presidential debates have a certain issue. What they are taking is the personality of is the personal matter, for example, of each presidential candidates, like how they're talking about scandals, for example, and so on and so forth. And this is what we don't want under our side of the house, right? Because because we told you on how this is and on how this is so harmful, right? Because look, under the status quo right now, it's going to be not fair for certain candidates, like for example, like how Biden, for example, like how Democrats candidates, for example, maybe they could attack some people's voters' donation, for example, and so on and so forth, that are not really correlated within how your view or your view or your argumentation about one certain issue, like how it should be talking about how green technology policy, for example, and so on. And this is what we don't want. Then this is what we don't want anymore under our side of the house, right? But it is going to lead you on my second argument. Why presidential debate in the US create a really toxic discourse? Look, what happened in the discourse right now? The debates is not only within the candidate. This presidential debates that are aired in television, in national television, is not only within the candidates. We told you on how this presidential debate are also affected their voters, ladies and gentlemen. It could trigger their supporters to attack each other supporters, ladies and gentlemen. And this is what we don't want under our side of the house, right? Because of how it's create a tension within voters in the status quo. It's create a more conflict within the voters in the USA itself, right? Just because they have a different presidential candidates they support, or how they have presidential candidates they want to vote. They attacking each other and each other's candidate between another voters. Right? This is what we don't want under our side of the house. But how then this is so? Toxic, right? But first layer, I told you on how the moment there is a lot of conflict, for example, the moment there's a lot of conflict within voters, with a lot of disagreement between voters, what's going to be happening under the status quo is that how the voters who are in a gray area, who are not deciding which voters that they are going to vote, is that how these voters will not engage anymore, ladies and gentlemen, within the election under the status quo, right? Because of how the status quo is so chaotic to begin with. Right? The moment these people who are coming from gray area, for example, the moment they're less engaging toward political discourse, means what? Means that there is less people who want to vote, ladies and gentlemen. There's a lot of people who are just not to vote because of how they feel that how presidential candidate election condition is not good to begin with, right? But second layer, I told you on how the discourse that are in the political issue right now in the US. That is not on how under the status quo, rather than talking about president's candidates, politics views toward even one certain topic, for example, the discourse under the status quo is all about how these politicians scandals, ladies and gentlemen, like how they are talking about these presidential candidates past, for example. And this is what we don't want under our side of the house, right? So what do we want under our side of the what do we want under our side of the house? Under our side of the house, we told you on how there is another ways for these president candidates to gaining voters rather than presidential debates that I would think that bring more beneficial rather than these presidential candidates. We are going to do massive campaign, for example, continuously proposing the agenda on the issue that these candidates want to grow. How through seminars, for example, that are done by loyal supporters that are continuously supporting them, for example, or through social media campaign, for example, keep talking with the minority like what certain Democrat candidates already done, and we think that this is more engaging towards the great voters who are coming from gray area. Gray area, but opening opposition need to explain how then the harm that we are told, the harm that we already told is still completely fine to be happen under the set of the house. Thus, we propose this motion.
All right, thank you, Prime Minister, for that speech. Now, to open the case of opposition, we call upon Leader of Op to open their case. Here.
Check, am I audible?
Yep, you're audible loud and clear.
Okay. I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Look, opening government basically taught you about how presidential debate only talk about personal matter and then throw about, hey, let's do massive campaign instead because it's better than presidential debate without actually explaining the exclusivity of massive campaign and not also explaining what kind of massive campaign they want, but basically all they talk is about claiming, right? Okay, but let's rebut them, right? Okay, they talk about how this that in the presidential debate they only talk about ghosting other presidential candidate personally, yada yada, and that, right? Number one, this is not true. Like you can see how certain presidential debate is actually talking about the current issue, like Black Lives Matter, for example, or LGBTQ plus issue, for example, right? But number two, even if they did talk about this kind of thing, we are okay with them attacking personal issues, because in order for you to become a president, it is not only about your policy, right? Your personal history of treating people should be taken into account. For example, on Trump history of misogyny towards women or pedophilia or whatever, or how Kamala Harris history of prosecuting black people. This all should be taken into account in the presidential debate. How can you lead a nation if your past is problematic in the very first place? What they need to prove is, however, how this kind of massive campaign is enough, because they only talk about, oh, this is enough without explaining anything. Like, okay, my argumentation is going to be simple, like two things. Number one, I'm going to talk about the importance of presidential debate principally in the US political context. And number two, on how this presidential debate act as a check and balance system in US politics. Like, number one, why does this presidential debate exist to begin with? Like, it exists in order for you to promote the value of transparency in presidential debate. Understand that in here we defend all kind of presidential debate, right? No matter Republican or Democrat, we defend any kind of this, right? You need to understand that how this presidential debate operates, right? It is a forum where you, as a voter, can attack your presidential candidates with questions regarding their policy maybe, or their political interest directly, right? It is different from campaign where it is only one-sided, like, oh, maybe for example me as Kamala Harris, for example, I want to give black people more freedom or whatever, without actually asking the black people what they really want, right? However, it's different when you talk about presidential debate. All the question, everything is unexpected, right? You can see in the past presidential debate when Kamala Harris suddenly questioned about her history of prosecuting black people. You can see on how Tulsi Gabbard suddenly questioning Joe Biden Green New Deal in a problematic way. You can see them attacking directly each other to see which one is actually the one that is worthy enough to be the US president, right? It is, you need to understand that not only it is also a forum for them to gain clarity about their policy. But let's talk about normal campaign that is existing, like, or massive campaign maybe. Notice that normal campaign, this kind of campaign, are contingent toward two things. Number one, the capital that they have in order for this campaign to appear in, for example, television, to in a billboard, or to afford to go to use airplanes to go toward this kind of state, for example. And number two, the team that is backing them, right? The team that is backing them, right? The team that are able to analyze this kind of people pattern. But even that also need money. You need to understand that not everyone in the presidential candidate is that kind of rich, right? Is that rich? But before that, we need to characterize the principle of election in the US itself. Notice that the value that they uphold is democracy in itself. In democracy, as a leader, you are required to do this. Number one, to create transparency when you role. And to gain this transparency, you need to be able to be held accountable by your campaign promises. This principle of transparency is important because you, as a democratic country, gain your mandate through people voice, right? And number two, you are democratic because you uphold transparency for people. So for people to be people, for this country to be ruled by people, you cannot ignore this principle because democracy is built upon this principle, right? You cannot call democracy without her people, right? Not only that, because not only that, you need to understand that this presidential debate allows politicians to deal with current issue in the way that, like, things like Black Lives Matter, LGBTQ plus issue, foreign trade. People can directly ask the candidates. That's why it's important to uphold this. But number two, I'm going to talk about how this presidential debate acts as a check and balance system in the US politics. Right? You need to understand that in the presidential debate, like I told you earlier, not everyone is rich enough, right? Notice that person like Pete Buttigieg, for example, or Elizabeth Warren, or Tulsi Gabbard, and all that kind of people who actually opt out from democratic fight from maybe in the recent or in the past, they can actually, all these Democrat candidates are losing from this campaign Joe Biden. Why is that the case? Because Joe Biden has a strong backer, strong investor, and strong backer in order for Joe Biden to actually pay people to give a massive campaign about him. And number two, how this Joe Biden are already in the game for a 50 or 60 years maybe, so that he have this kind of experience that other people have. That's why he is able to choose the team marketing for him, right? Not You need to understand that this presidential debate exists as a campaign tools for this politician in order to promote their ideas equally, because in this presidential debate you do not use any kind of money, you do not use any kind of team of marketing, you just there stand in the front of podium talking about your issue and debating just like in this chamber here about why your side is important and why other candidate is bad, right? Because all this time you need to understand that this kind of campaign is actually not really equal to begin with, right? Because the moment Joe Biden create this kind of large scale campaign, these people, like for example, who have less influence but actually good, sadly, for example, like Pete Buttigieg, who sadly drop out of the candidate, are are, are really ketutupan sama with Joe Biden campaign, right? That's why in here the likelihood of transparency is better in the world where presidential debate exists. That's why judges, in order to create a better America, you need to vote for presidential debate. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Al-O, for that speech. Now, to continue the case of government, we would like to call the Deputy Prime Minister. Here.
Hello, am I audible?
Yep, you're audible, loud and clear.
Okay. Judges, we could agree that how presidential debate is one of the moment where the people always wait in every elections, right? Sadly, the quality of the debates has declined with each succeeding campaign, right? Because right now the debates does not talk about the facts and the facts that is happening within the society and what kind of policies that they offer, but rather than attacking the personal matters within the candidates, right? But there will be two things in my speech, and all of my rebuttal will be intertwined in it. First, what does the presidential debates do for the society, right? We'll talk about the democracy in US, where these days there are so many issues going on within the elections, right? We're going to talk about the democracy value under US government. What we need within the democracy should include like the accountability, representations, and participations, right? My first speaker will tell you how then the harm that we have in the status quo right now will impact these three factors, right? I'm going to talk further within this issue, right? First, we're going to talk about the accountability. Often oppositions never prove to you how then under the side of the house there will be accountability when the moments the debate goes wrong, for example, and everyone goes within the issues on how everyone goes within the issue of the post-ornamental. People will still be willing to engage within the political issues, and they're willing to actually do this kind of check and balance, right? What we want within this factor is how the candidate could have check and balance within the issues on how current policies and the policies that they have right now, right? The recent presidential debates result into society does not focus within the policies, because what Donald Trump do is continuously ridiculing Biden, for example, and how people also keep mentioning that Trump continuously lie within a day, right? Whatever that Trump do is not always based on facts. For example, like how he says like how he says when you want to build the wall to separate Mexico and America, for example, it is because it is for the betterment of US, but instead it's to separate it, right? I think that this is exactly what we do not want, right? Because the moment when we do this presidential debates, we actually going to make these candidates does not look that good to begin with, and make people to actually less engaged in the case, because what is happening in the debates is not based on facts and those kind of things, right? This is how they talk about the track record. This is how, because they're going to talk about the track record of historical issues of the candidates, right? Because they're going to talk should be like the policies upon the candidates or because if what they want is that because opening up questions told you that we need to have talk about personal issues and characters because it's something that is matter, right? We think that your personal issues or character can still be seen by the society because the moment you become a candidate, everyone talk directly and look up for you, right? Your for example, people will directly people will directly look after you, where did you graduate and how is your track record and those kind of things. But the problem in presidential candidate, where the place should be where a big place where they should be debate an issue, for example, so like talking about the climate change, education, and healthcare, and which policy that could actually solve the problem. But instead of talking about that, they're going to talk this kind of personal issue. We think that it's a waste of time and a waste of money that they do, right? This is exactly what we do not want to, right? What we want them is actually to focus and then focus on their campaigning in their policies, like in social media, maybe in social media, or going to the rural area, or like giving seminars upon their policies within the society and those kind of things. We think that this is better off on the side of the house rather than directly doing this kind of policies debate, right? Because what they do is actually protecting their self ego to be much more better than the other candidate. We understand that is happening within the debate, but we understand this is always going to be happening within the debate. But we think that in terms of presidential candidate, for example, we do not want that, right? Because we have to stick within the issues on how they're going to solve the problems, right? Because it leads into the discourse, the toxic discourse, like my first speaker told you. That's why you see right now, whether it's like in media, in news platform or in your social media, is how Donald Trump looking so stupid in the presidential candidate instead of what kind of policies that Donald Trump can do to solve within the issue and those kind of things, right? This is exactly because this is exactly happened because of the presidential candidate. But second, we're going to talk about the representations, right? This is where it becomes rotten because the discourse talk about scandal and no one actually understands why the idea of representation should be the people who voicing out their community voices, right? The idea is just the idea what happening, the narrative that is standing in the society is how we have to make sure that Trump get done from his positions, for example, without considering what kind of policies that Trump has, right? So that's why we normalize on how every other people could actually becoming the replacement of Trump, for example, because of the talk is how the characteristic of this presidential instead of what are the communities need and what are the problems in it, right? The idea of the transparency will still going to be exist under outside of the house, right? Because in your campaign, no social media campaign, marching in the street, goes to rural area and seminar, we're going to still exist under outside of the house. So the moment when you do this, which is better off under side of the house, because you will still going to make sure that you will gain a voters, right? This is exactly where you also will going to spread your this is exactly the moment when you're going to still spread your the idea of transparency that opening oppositions one under the side of the house, right? But we're gonna talk about the idea if the idea of investor, because under the side of the house they say that there will be no investor, right? We think that the idea of investor and the side of the house could be catered, because the moment when you have a good policy to propose, for example, the moment you have a lot of people to agree with our proposal is the fact that the moment you would have lots of donations, right? Because people agree with your policy, and the moment people think that you are worth to sit on presidential candidate, people will also support you anyway. And also other parties, for example, they also want a place within the parliamentary, right? This is exactly how they're going to still support one party to another parties, right? So that's why they will still going to have investment, right? If you're talking about elections, what is the most important for you is to gain voters or to gather the people who are coming from gray area to make sure that they engage within the political issue, right? It is hard for us to gain voters from gray area if we continue use this presidential debate in the US, right? They would always see how the presidential debate is nonsense and how it only creates chaos and result into nothing, right? It is important to create more engagement. We tell you that under side of the house, we're going to create more engagement because we're not going to make our candidates becoming look more stupid and those kind of things, right? We think that these questions never answered by opening options. How under the side of the house they're going to be able to protect the image within this candidate, right? Because what happens in status quo right now, these candidates continuously ruining their image with this presidential candidate and making people going to less engage within the political issue and they're less likely willing to vote. Right? This is exactly what happened in the U.S. and how they say that they are reluctant to vote because the president's debate shows on how uncapable the candidate is we propose.
OG, don't forget to mute your Zoom. Anyway, thank you, the DPM, for that speech. Now, to close the case of the opening half of the debate, we call upon the Deputy Leader of Opposition to deliver their case. Here.
I'm sorry, give me time. I need to set up my timer as well. Well, where is it? Okay, I would like to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Okay, so I would like to put several rebuttals. The first one is that for the investment case that was brought by the last speaker, is that, okay, what we mean is during presidential debates, nobody will show up. Nobody will show up capital, show up investments, and etc. Our engagement is in a president debate. There will be topics that are that will be brought up in presidential debate. Not only. Oh my God. Okay. I'm sorry. I slipped. Okay. So, the OG argument already is already not working because they did not engage the campaign based on money and team and experience with that point. They did not engage that, and as well for the points where you say debates didn't talk about fact in society but attacking in another debate. Basically, what you mean is the debate is not really effective anymore. I would like to point out during my points. The first point that I want to say is that the presidential debate is very massive. It's a big presidential event with big marketing. So the chance of a presidential candidate is lying will be less. Why did I say that? Is because if they lie, they will be noted by a lot of people who are already in that area, because this is again a big presidential event, and they will be held accountable for it. There is a thing that I would like to bring up from my previous speaker. That is the importance of voice and honesty in ruling a nation. Voice is needed because without this, us as normal people without any authority, wouldn't be able to wouldn't be able to have a direct communication link to the leader of the nation. This is also important due to the fact that as a leader of any nation, the president is never perfect. Yes, they had a minister and other governing bodies, but even they need to have a view of their nation from the people that they lead, from the view of the people that they lead. The presidential debate, while what you say is already losing its effectiveness, it basically has the function of giving everyone a voice to ask, to propose an idea, or to hold someone accountable for their action. That last part is also important as it relates to how honesty is important for the people to respect their leader. A leader of the nation has to show that they are trustworthy and have things under control. And when they don't, to at least give a reason of why they don't have the nation under control and what the leaders would do to solve the situation as fast as possible, which also have an additional function to make people less anxious about the current situation of their nation. What I was saying before is, even though you say that the presidential debate has, less effectiveness now, and that is mainly because people are mainly more interested in attacking the other group, or instead of bringing up topics for the debate. Yes, that is a negative. But the positives here, the one that already show up, basically, this is also important for the president, since he needs to listen to the different faction in the nation, whether that means the Democrat, the Republic, or other faction that might have a
POI,
helpful
sir.
suggestion to make the nation better. The positives here far outweighs the negative. Yes, the event may lead to one faction making a fuss or accusing the slandering at the other faction, as any debate does. Any debate has that kind of situation. But this setback is minuscule compared to the opposite reality, where people have no way to directly talk to the leaders of their nation. Best case scenario, leaders become delusional and runs the country however they want. And worst case scenario, the government becomes ineffective. And with the leader not knowing what the people want, this could lead to the people not having any respect for the leader, as well as
Before the
possibly
answer,
causing the people to question the necessity of a leader. Sorry, no. Not only that, you need to understand that social medias, the place where people slander each other, is actually where all the impact happen. Social media after this presidential debates happen are will be flooded with things like meme, people opinion, analysis. This is a proof that people are taking part in the politics. This discussion happening here, it's different when campaigns are one-sided and money dependent. There are literally zero talks in the social media about this. So what I want to add as well is that basically the presidential debate, while seeming ineffective, it will of course bring up the problems in the nation. Of course, it will be broad. People wouldn't just accuse each other. Yes, they will do that, but it's not going to basically be better than if there is no way for the people to talk at all.
POI, sir.
Yes.
We think that the people can still directly engage with the candidate or to talk within the idea, because other campaign, they will still going to rural area or even doing the seminar of their policy making. This is where they actually going to have real talk within the issues that is happening within the society.
Here's the thing, that there is no camera there. Why this is out, in our opinion, is more important is because this thing is a huge event. Everyone sees this. Everyone in social media sees it. In your case, people can just go to your place, yes, but there is no one who held accountable. If anyone hold the leader of the nation accountable in your scenario, how are people going to believe you? But in our scenario, in the presidential debate, everyone knows what the president is talking about. Everyone knows what everyone is talking about. And people, of course, respond to it, as you can see, like the points that I brought out earlier. Social media is a proof of this. People will go riot when they see when they see presidential debate. They will shout out their opinion. They will shout out memes. This is to prove that everyone contributes to this. Everyone sees this, and by this, the presidential debate hold people in the debate accountable. If what you say is true, then it would be more like, okay, then the president is going to the tiny place and make a promise. If he failed to deliver on that, who's going to believe you if you shout that out on social media? None. Nobody is going to believe you. That's why this thing that we're talking about is very important. This is
Before
why
six, sir.
yes, it's already 7 minutes. So in conclusion, we think that our side is way better because it gives a way unbiased version of people being able to talk, give opinion, and help people accountable in the presidential debate. Yes, it is not that effective as it was way before, but it is effective nonetheless. We're proud to oppose.
All right, thank you, DLO, for that speech. Now, to open the closing half of the debate, we call upon member of government to open their case. Here.
All right. Am I audible?
Yep, you're audible.
Yeah. Sorry. Before that, may I go to the toilet first?
Yes, and please be quick.
Very well. Right, sorry about that. Anyway, beginning my speech in 3, 2, 1. All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to point out some things that are brought to the debate by the opening opposition, and why I believe that everything that they propose are contingent on some things. Well, essentially, what they propose rely on several things to be true, and that's a big if. You see, one of the things they mention is that the president's personal history should be taken into account. Well, I'm paraphrasing, of course. What they're trying to say is essentially there are several track records that the president uh, that the president the presidential candidate's track record should be taken into account when it comes to the presidential election, and presidential debates would accommodate this. However, we fail to see why the presidential debate would be a good time to bring about this matter. Because after all, formally speaking and traditionally, presidential debates are supposed to be a place where presidents are meant to present their ideas and have it be challenged by other presidential candidates. With that being said, we believe that as the opening government has stated before, that the government has failed. Not the government, sorry. That the president has that the modern the current culture surrounding U.S. presidential debates have strayed far from this original purpose, that of providing means to present ideas and discuss them. Why is this the case, ladies and gentlemen? We believe that the reasoning for this has yet to be explained sufficiently by the opening government bench. You see, ladies and gentlemen, we believe that one of the main reasons that we have this current culture of presidential debates not about being debating ideas or proposing ideas, but instead about making the other candidate look bad, or making making our own candidate look better and more desirable or more glorious, so to speak. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is mainly because the complexity of running a modern nation is simply too big for any average voter to understand. When it comes to complex policies, no, thank you. When it comes to complex policies, the average voter could barely understand the complexities behind it, and most of them would simply assume that as long as the president is in charge, then they would naturally be in control of absolutely everything under the country, and they would just make everything better. However, what most voters don't understand is that there are checks and balances in a democratic government that prevents presidents to enact everything that they promise. And so, whatever the president says in a presidential debate are lip service at best. Because in reality, when it comes to actually running office, there are various challenges that makes it not so easy, or not as simple as the president-elect or the presidential candidate would portray. And so, whatever they say could hardly be taken as seriously. Now, in response,
sir,
yes, please.
by that logic, the campaign that you championing are also a lip service and cannot be held accountable at the end of the day. Why is it any different?
Very well, I will tell you why it is different. Because when it comes to presidential debates, it's made even worse by the fact that it is in a constrained environment, that of debates, and with an even more constrained environment, there's no incentive, or it wouldn't be reasonable for a president to prioritize truthful discussions, and would in fact they would focus more on lip service. Now, why would it be different on a campaign? Now, we wouldn't say that it's far more perfect on a campaign, but in a campaign, at least they have to take many more things into account, and they would actually have to prove in campaigning is of course extensive. So among this would be plans or a political party manifesto that would take that would require more thought and not and far more than just lip service. Now, back onto my argument, there are concerns in terms of the presidential debate that the opposition may think that while it's true that presidents would tend to lie in presidential debates, it's also this is also not really a problem, because at the end of the day there are fact checkers and people who essentially verify what the presidential candidates say in order to disincentivize lying. However, even if such a mechanism exists and is effective, at the end of the day, the current political climate and political culture of the United States has been very tribalistic and identitarian. What we mean by that is, and this is not just something unique to the US. For most people in the democratic countries, demagoguery and populism is something that's prevalent and common. So this means that that even if the president has been caught lying, so to speak, the presidential candidate, the supporters would still fervently support them anyway. Why? Because it's simply something that is characteristic of tribalistic or identity politics. So, ladies and gentlemen, what we believe that presidential debates are at best glorified formalities that bring nothing productive to the that would bring nothing productive to the democratic to a democratic election. And for that, we are proud to to propose.
All right, thank you, Member of God, for that speech. Now, to continue the case of opposition, we call upon Member of Opposition to deliver their case. Here.
I'm audible, right?
Yep, you're audible.
Okay, thanks. I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Before I talk about the deadlock that's happening within the opening debate, I'm gonna engage to CG first, sorry, because there are only one big case is credibility, which I don't think is very much should be in this debate, considering that how credibility won't exactly happen in their side either. But like, here's the thing: under the characterization of presidential debate, understand that there's a pressure towards this sort of debate, right? When you have that much media attention, when you have that much pressure, and you try to fight with your own ideals, because at the end of the day, even if there's there is no credibility, I don't think it matters anyway under both sides, and and that's not the debate that we were talking about. So let's see the deadlock between both sides, right? Which is uh, none of the opening benches really engage on each other, because OO says that OO says basically runs on the best case scenario of opposition, which is the debate is going to be grow well, while opening government also engaged on their best case scenario, which the debate is going very wrong. So I'm gonna give you the reason, then I'm gonna answer the BOP that OG gives to opposition is what happens if the debate goes wrong, and secondly how we engage with people. But before I go into that explanation, let me characterize you some of the key important stuff. And this is how we're gonna pretty much differentiate us from OO, because they never explain this. Understand that understand that U.S. presidential is not not something that is akin to Indonesian, right? It's very much clear we're not what kind of political spectrum that you have, what kind of ideas that you have, and intangent with your background, such as African American, Asian, and whatnot, right? This matters a lot when you are in a debate, considering the debate are considering that my point case that differentiate from OO is how this presidential debate can truly be the representation of this person, can truly be the representation of the America itself, the voters most likely. This is very important, considering that these are the images that you're gonna see, that that technically presidential are are the extension of you, are the extension of your nation at the end of the day, are the extension of your identity. So why then does the debate answers number one? Why does this can beautifully represent the people, and why secondly this going to create the engagement that OG certainly wants and won't happen under their side, and thirdly how does this counts as how does this solution way better than how does this manifest into something better, right? firstly, how does this become your representation? Understand that these presidential debate are talking within their either political alignment and or personal experience, like what OG said. Even if say you don't, you see the debate is not talking about, whether or not the Green New Deal is good, whether or not this or that good, or about like how Hillary Clinton, for instance, in the past do something bad or there's some scandal to it. I'm not, yeah, basically that. This shows you that it is engagement with whether or not there's a question towards the voters themselves, whether or not you as a somebody wants to be represented as that person. This is very much important when you see, for instance, Barack Obama wins the debate, because not just because he's rebel, but also because he represents the African American struggle, for instance. This is exactly what you entirely want when you engage on this sort of debate, when you questions their personal background, when you question their true identity, because this matters a lot to a person. For you to vote someone that is aligned with you, that you can feel empowerment, because you're basically, character, your basically ideal hero is now being the president and leading the country. This is exactly what we want, that even if it goes wrong, we still have the benefit of these voters, we still have the benefit of the people who are, people who can feel represented, feel like they're being in the country, because that's what they, that's the benefit of this debate. And moreover, even moreover, what exactly does how does it project into towards each candidate, right? Debate at the end of the day is the proving ground when you have that much media attention and that much pressure, like I said earlier. Like, but this means also that, these people who are, want to vote for instance Trump, because it feels that it connected, can engage towards them, meaning that, for instance, how they're going to solve the problem, what kind of problem they're going to solve. Are they aligned with the interests of the people or not? Are they aligned with the interests of you or not? This is very much important when you're trying to, when you're trying to vote a presidential candidate, when you're trying to know who is going to run the country, right? That even if that you know that even that you at the end of the day needs to know this. Understand, the comparative is under their side of the house. When you do campaign, is campaign geared towards a certain individual. You're not gonna go into campaign into LA, for instance, and then cheering about, I don't know, Alaska, for instance. That's not going to happen under their side of the house. The campaign are pretty much geared towards them, meaning that you're not, meaning that there is meaning that the representation of the people not exactly engage with other people, for instance. Me, under our side of the house, we truly have their own representation fighting for other people. Understand the political spectrum that exists inside of US is very much clear. So you want to know which one is the most liberal, which one is the less liberal, and which one geared towards you, and trying to fight those kind of ideas. So you have a certainty that this person that you truly want. How this is going to be better? How is this going to be better? It's going to be better when you have this sort of certainty, when you know that who you're going to pick, when you can feel represented, empowerment, because of, who you're going to pick is going to choose this, and they cannot question the credibility of this, considering that everything. If you want to question, then question everything, considering they never give you any sort of, ideals or even solution under their side of the house, right? So that's the fear of the debate. But understand that this sort of representation should be the key primary source of voting. Should be the one who, completely by the parameter whether you want to vote or not. Not because, they campaign, not because they're, the dangdut that they the biggest dangdut that they have, but what kind of ideals do they want to represent? And what kind of, what kind of ideals when they're faced with an opposition, how they're going to resolve it with their own experience, with their own identity, or even and political alignment. This is that we as CEO, this is the idea that only CO brings, and only plays within the best case scenario, and also OG and CG is pretty much irrelevant to this debate. Thank you. That's all I can say.
Right, thank you, member of opposition, for that speech. Now, to close the case of government altogether, we call upon government whip. Here.
Tas. Okay.
Yep, you're audible.
Okay, now starting. Wait, timer. Now, 3, 2, 1. So, first and foremost, I'm going to go into my rebuttals. So, the opposition team talks about bringing personal information is okay. Sure, we might agree that knowing personal information about certain presidents or president candidacy would be great, but the action in which it is done in presidential debate is not done in the right way, but it is more like a dissing competition to actually glorify one's action in action. One's action, for example, they might talk about, well, a few years ago you post this. At the same time, those kind of action that they are actually trying to do in this presidential debate are actually not meant to actually certify them as a look, I'm a good president, but what they're trying to do is look, they are a bad, not just because they are a bad president, but what they're trying to talk about is look, they are a bad person. The opposition also talks about that debates can also be about talking about real problems. Sure, we agree, and it should be that way. But the current status quo is not focused on that. Sure, the opposition also talks about that they do talk about problems or issues such as LGBTQ plus problems or other problems. Now, even though those serious issues were brought up, in the end, what the debate will be about is how one president will diss their counterpart about their views on such problems. Now, talking about presidential debate, the opposition talks it being a massive event, and so opposition said that as it is so, it is impossible for the candidates to lie. Now we have to understand that we think that this argument doesn't stand, as even people can lie whenever and whatever they want. Even when you swear under the name of God Himself or herself, people can lie by themselves because that is because that is their own mouth and they can do so. They also talks about that debate in being the only place where you can bring up problems. So we believe that this is false, as there are other ways for people to talk about issues. Sure, the opening half probably talk about those candidates will go to people. Those candidates will talk to people. But sure, the opposition also talks about there's no camera, there's no correction, there is no people to actually see and record the events and also write down what these president candidates is talking about. Sure, that might be true, but at the same time, ladies and gentlemen, first, talking about issues in forms such as protesting is viable. More so, we can also talk in forms such as going through public figures. For example, from idols that we from idols that we love, from their songs. But ladies and gentlemen, now even though they don't necessarily play in the political sense, but their influence is big enough that that the political candidacy will see about what these public figures peoples are actually talking about. Now, the opposition also talks about there is an engagement in the debate, and that is we believe that it is important, and they also said that that is the most important part in the debate, and we also agree that it is important for a debate to be engaging, ladies and gentlemen. But when the debate is engaging in dissing the counterpart, I think it is wrong in and of itself. The debate should be engaging in actual solving problems and bringing up ideas. Those kinds of engaging, not engaging in dissing the counterpart about what they are talking about. Now, opposition also closing opposition also talks about candidates that are online. You as the voters can actually pick people that, I think this guy is great and I think I should vote for him. Now, I think this is, ladies and gentlemen, we have to see that this is a clear play on identity politics. Ladies and gentlemen, the hero or aspirations, ladies and gentlemen, are candidates for presidency. Sure, it might be harmless, ladies and gentlemen, but under that narrative, people would vote because of their favoritism. They will see that, okay, that guy is great. Whatever his agenda is, that guy is great. Now, ladies and gentlemen, that is simply identity politics, and we should not strive for those kind of narratives to grow. It should be about real, proper political agendas. So, ladies and gentlemen, under our side of the house, we can see that we don't see any value in bringing personal matter other than for dissing. And it's not the objective or goal of the debate, in which their side thinks that bringing personal talks should solve the end problem should be taken into aspiration. But, ladies and gentlemen, the place in which it is talked about, the US presidential debate, is not the place to talk about such things. Now, we believe that effectiveness is not exclusive to their side because they claim that they have an effective way to actually talk to the president candidacy. As have said before, effectiveness from our side more are grown in forms of protesting and talking through public figures, ladies and gentlemen. So it is not exclusive on their side about an effective way to talk directly to presidential candidates. Under our side of the house, ladies and gentlemen, the political culture, we believe that the US political culture should grow toward a clear political goal. Under their side of the house, the political culture will grow upon dissing their counterpart, and more so in favoritism and in seeing other people as hero or aspirations, which is a clear sign of danger that my first speaker has talked about. Because of the complexity, ladies and gentlemen, because of the complex policies in actually managing modern countries, rise of the culture have strayed. As my first speaker has said, that is clearly why when they said that their political culture will only grow in favoritism, it is because it is far easier for people to comply with people that seems to know what they are doing in presidential candidacy. We also believe, as the CG, that there is it is not productive to progress democracy in the culture of dissing and favoritism. That is all from us. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, government member, for that speech. Now, to close the case of opposition and the debate altogether, we call upon opposition whip. Here.
Test, am I audible? Halo? Yes, am I audible?
Can you go, misalnya kayak suara kalian dengeran, cuman kayak kecil banget gitu.
Test, am I audible?
Yeah, much better. Gimana? Yang lain gimana? Oh wait, wait. Gio kayaknya drop out.
Okay.
Yuk, udah masuk.
Gio udah aman. Pandu aman ya?
Aman.
Okay, let's start.
Okay. I'll start my speech on 3, 2, 1. I think we are going to be the only bench that will engage on the idea of government, right? Because the idea of government are, the political discourse on debate are pretty toxic. Therefore, this is why we have to erase those kind of debate. But I think this is not actually true. First, CG said to you that the complexity on govern the country are really hard, and people will just come to favoritism. But this is exactly what debating solve, because when people are debating, they have to break down those kind of complex idea towards the simple one that can be engaged by common folks. And I think this is one of many reasons why debating are the one who have to be defended. But OJ explained to you why the discourse on the debate are pretty toxic. I think this is not entirely true. I think the discourse on politics, especially on USA, are pretty toxic. It's not just come from debate, it's come from campaign, for example, how actually Trump talking about Joe Biden like Sleepy Joe on their own campaign, and I think it's much more worse on your side rather than us. Why? When you're trying to engage on this debate, at least the opponent side of the house can clarify what those can actually mean, what they are not actually doing that, and so on and so forth, right? So I think our kind of discourse on those debates are much more less toxic. But even if that's the case, even if uh, debating will create much more toxic toxic discourse because they are taking personal experience and so on and so forth. I think it's still okay compared to benefit that people can hear the policy, like what Golden said to you. They can knew what kind of what kind of person that will that will represent them, because we have to agree on this. We have to agree at least on the debate. People trying to understand and engage with the candidates, right? And this is exclusive on the debate, because debate are are trying to comparing candidates towards others candidates, right? There are two kind of debate in the USA, and I will tell the context on this debate. First, the context on the debating presidency on the parties, and second, out the parties when RNC representative, Republican representative versus Democratic representative. I think the harm that opening government try to tell to you that people will less enthusiastic towards discourse on politics. I think this is not necessarily true, and I'll explain why the opposite effect will happen. If you remember on the NC campaign, on the NC debates, uh, why the enthusiasm of Bernie bro, that comes from that's only comes from the DNC debate. Why? Because people finally can choose what kind of person that been represented by those kind of party, even though those kind of party choose Biden in the end of the day, but at least they can choose what kind of people who will represent him, and they will choose either or not. They will choose the opposite side because they feels like uh, Democratic Party are being a snake, being a traitor towards their candidate, towards Bernie, for example, and so on and so forth. And I think this is giving much more choice towards the citizen, towards the common folk, so they can choose what kind of uh, candidates will represent them. Comparatively talking in a government side of the house, they have to only vote on two candidates. They only have to vote either Biden or either Trump, for example. And those kind of candidates are just someone who being soft on those kind of parties, right? Because for example, Republican just soft Trump in our faces without giving us any kind of candidates. And I think democratic debate on the inner party itself already being good. But I'll explain to you why uh, even outside parties like Biden versus Trump are still much more better. Gold already explained to you what kind of policy that will be in debate while being debating. Uh, Comparatively, seeing on the government side of the house, they're told when the only option those kind of candidates have are a campaigning or protest. But those kind of choice are the one who can are the candidates are the one who have the power to choose what kind of things they have to answer, right? Like seeing Trump just want to engage about immigration problems, but they don't want to engage on climate change problems. They don't want to engage on maybe LGBTQ community problem, and so on and so forth. By using a debate as a tools towards answering those kind of questions, such as how Trump will solve LGBTQ problems, for example, or how Trump's will their stance on feminist movement, for example, and so on and so forth. By using this kind of tools, which is mean our debate, we can force this kind of candidates to answer what our needs, right? Because we just have two candidates. We just have to Biden or Trump. And when they are debating, at least we can, they have to provide those kind of things. This is why we really proud to oppose.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Op, for that speech. That marks the end of the debate. You guys can virtually cross floor and virtually shake hands and wait for the judges to deliberate the decision. Thank you, everyone.